Hello and welcome to Study Kendra. Today we will talk about Class 12th Chapter 1, the Cold War Era. Before we start, I request to all please like and subscribe. Let us start with what is Cold War. Cold War is a state of tension between countries in which each side adopts policies designed to strengthen itself and weaken the other by falling short of actual war. Main reason for the start of Cold War. The ideologies of the Soviet Union and America were completely different, due to which the Cold War started. American ideologies. Capitalism. Under capitalism, the right to take all the production-related decisions of a country is in the hands of the public. In other words, the private sector in the country is completely free. Liberalism. Under this idea, efforts are made to provide maximum freedom in the country. Democracy. In a democratic system, the public chooses its rulers on its own. Soviet Union ideologies. Socialism. In this system, the right to take all the production-related decisions of a country is in the hands of the government. Communism. The communist system is based on equality, where all people are given equal rights. Cold War. The Cold War was a war of ideologies. The US followed the ideology of liberal democracy and capitalism while the USSR backed the ideology of socialism and communism. The Second World War, 1939 to 1945, ended with the defeat of the Axis powers led by Germany, Italy and Japan by the Allied forces led by the US, Soviet Union, Britain, and France. It marked the beginning of the Cold War. The Second World War ended when the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, causing Japan to surrender. This decision of the US was both criticized and supported. But the consequence of the end of the Second World War was the rise of 2 new powers on the global stage. The United States and the Soviet Union became the greatest powers in the world with the ability to influence events anywhere on Earth. But the Cold War, despite being an intense form of rivalry between great powers, remained a cold and not hot or shooting war. It was due to the logic of deterrence. The logic of deterrence means when both sides have the capacity to respond against an attack and to cause so much destruction that neither can afford to initiate war. The 2 superpowers and their allies were expected to behave as rational and responsible actors. Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. Cuba was a socialist country on the edge of America. The biggest problem was that there was a socialist government, but it was on the edge of America. Cuba was an ally of the Soviet Union and received diplomatic and financial aid from it. In April 1961, leaders of the USSR were worried that the United States of America would invade communist-ruled Cuba and overthrow its president Fidel Castro. In 1962, the leader of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, placed nuclear missiles in Cuba for converting it into a Russian base. 3 weeks later, Americans became aware of it. The US President John F. Kennedy and his advisors tried to find a solution to avoid full-scale nuclear war. But they were determined to get Khrushchev to remove the missiles and nuclear weapons from Cuba. Kennedy ordered American warships to intercept any Soviet ships heading to Cuba as a way of warning the USSR. This clash between the USA and the USSR came to be known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. It made the entire world nervous. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a high point which came to be known as the Cold War. It refers to the competition, the tensions, and a series of confrontations between the United States and Soviet Union. The emergence of 2 power blocs. The 2 superpowers, the US and USSR, wanted to expand their spheres of influence in various parts of the world. Hence, they decided to get help from the smaller countries. These smaller states got the promise of protection, weapons and economic aid against their local rivals, mostly regional neighbors. The first division took place in Europe. Most countries of Western Europe sided with the US and thus came to be known as Western Alliance. The countries of the Eastern Europe joined the Soviet camp and came to be known as Eastern Alliance. The Western Alliance formed itself into an organization, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. It came into existence in April 1949 with 12 states. NATO declared that armed attack on any one of them in Europe or North America would be regarded as an attack on all of them. The Eastern Alliance, also known as the Warsaw Pact, was led by the Soviet Union. It was established in 1955. Its principal function was to counter NATO's forces in Europe. In East and Southeast Asia and in West Asia, Middle East, the United States built an alliance system called the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, SEATO, and the Central Treaty Organization, CENTO. Many newly independent countries were worried about losing their freedom. Cracks and splits within the alliances were quick to appear. Communist China quarreled with the USSR towards the late 1950s. The other important development was the non-aligned movement, NAM. The smaller countries were of more help to the superpowers because they were the means to gain vital resources such as oil and minerals, locations to spy on each other and to launch weapons. Arenas of the Cold War. The arenas of the Cold War refer to areas where crisis and war occurred or threatened to occur between the alliance systems but did not cross certain limits. The Cold War was also responsible for several shooting wars. The two superpowers were poised for direct encounter in Korea, 1950-53, Berlin, 1958-62, the Congo, the early 1960s, and in several other places. Jawaharlal Nehru, one of the key leaders of NAM, played a key role in mediating between the two Koreas. In the Congo crisis, the UN Secretary General played a key mediatory role. The US and USSR decided to collaborate in limiting or eliminating certain kinds of nuclear and non-nuclear weapons. The two sides signed 3 significant agreements within a decade. These were Limited Test Ban Treaty, LTBT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, ABMT. Challenge to Bipolarity. The non-aligned movement, NAM, offered the newly decolonized countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America a third option, i.e., not to join any of the alliances. NAM was founded by 3 leaders: Yugoslavia's Josip Broz Tito, India's Jawaharlal Nehru, and Egypt's leader Jamal Abdel Nasser. Indonesia's Sukarno and Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah strongly supported them. The first NAM summit was held in 1961 in Belgrade. Non-alignment neither means isolationism nor neutrality. It played a role in mediating between the two rival alliances. New international economic order. The challenge for the newly decolonized countries was to become more developed economically and to lift their people out of poverty. The idea of a new international economic order, NIEO, originated with this realization. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, brought out a report in 1972 entitled, Towards a New Trade Policy for Development. The nature of non-alignment changed to give greater importance to economic issues. NAM became an economic pressure group. India and the Cold War. India followed a two-way policy regarding the Cold War. It did not join any of the alliances and raised voice against the newly decolonized countries becoming part of these alliances. The policy of India was not fleeing away, but was in favor of actively intervening in world affairs to soften Cold War rivalries. The non-alignment gave India the power to take international decisions and to balance one superpower against the other. India's policy of non-alignment was criticized on several counts. But still it has become both as an international movement and a core of India's foreign policy. Conclusion. As the 1990s began, the Cold War was finally over, and the United States was the sole remaining superpower. But hopes for a safer, more peaceful world would be dashed as regional conflicts and global problems challenged the American foreign policy establishment to chart a new course for the United States. Thanks for watching. If you find this video helpful and informative, please like, share and hit the subscribe button.